Hello world, I have a question for you. How would you like to be immortal? Okay, well, close your eyes and count to 3. Are you ready? Close your eyes. 1, 2, 3. You are now immortal. You can open your eyes. I'm lying, of course, but the point is, if you make ceramics, those works that we leave behind when we die have an incredibly long life. The earliest ceramic forms ever found and dated thus far go back 29,000 years. And I think this is really important to bear in mind as we make ceramics. It's incredible to think that those little pots we make can last that long. And I think it's really important that those pots that we do make say something about us. There are 3, I suppose, types of potter. There are potters who are part of a dynasty and have a lineage in what they do. Simon Leach is a good example of that. When you look at the history of his family and the pots that he produces, you can see that lineage reflected in their making. Secondly, we come to potters with a recognisable identity. Somebody like Lucy Ree is a great example of that. But potters on YouTube that spring to mind straight away are people like Steve Booton, who makes fired raku wares and adds turned wood that he makes himself to them, which become a part of the pot. And Dirt Kicker pottery is another good example. Cindy there makes really nice, I would say, soft forms, often with pastel glazes, but you can quite often see her pots and go, oh, well, that's by Dirt Kicker pottery. The last group of potters are potters who I suppose you could call fickle, where everything they make is different, the forms are different and the glazes are different, and it says very little about them as people. I think I've fallen into that group, especially early on, and it's interesting to look back at my early work and nothing about it says anything about me. There's no continuity there. There's no reflection of who I am as a person or how I feel or what I like. And an awful lot of us, when we start off, make pottery like that, and it's that I want to address. To start off with, I want to show you 3 pots, none of which are signed, and all of which I think say something about their making. So this is the first one. It's an absolutely standard mass-produced bowl. It says nothing about the maker because, well, there is no maker. It's a factory-produced ware. And in 10,000 years' time, when somebody looks at this, they will not be able to read anything into it because it doesn't have a story to tell. Secondly, here's a You Know Me by Steve Booton, who I spoke of earlier. This again is unsigned, and it says an awful lot about the person who made it, even though it's not signed. It's incredibly light, it's been thrown really well, the glaze has been chosen well, it's crackled very nicely over the surface. I don't know if you can see that. And all in all, it's a nicely made pot. It's not something I think that Steve would hold up as an example of his work particularly, because, as I mentioned earlier, he has a very different style that he likes to work in. But it still says an awful lot about the way he works. Lastly, and I don't know if you'll be able to even guess who made this, because of course, well, I say of course, there's no of course about it. It's a 5,000-year-old Chinese pot, but it still says something about the person who made it. There is traces of slipped decoration on it. I don't know if I can move this so that you can see. There's a little bit of spiral work there, and on the neck there's a little zigzag pattern that goes round in, and there's traces of white and orange left, so it was obviously very brightly coloured to start off with. The form says something about the potter and the way it was made. It was made in a press mould, 2 pieces, front and back, or whichever you like really, in those 2 parts. And after they were joined together, and you can see the join quite obviously, they then made the foot, and you can still see the pinch marks very slightly, more so underneath where they've gone round and made it. So even though this is 5,000 years old, we can still read something into it about the person who made it. So the question is, how do you find a style? I think the most important thing of all, as a potter, this doesn't apply to people who model clay, but it does to potters, is to have a good technique. I know everybody says the same thing, but repeat throwing, etc., learning to throw the best forms that you can is really important. So that's the fundamentals, but we all know that. The second thing is how to find your own identity within the world of ceramics. I think knowledge is important. Now, I don't mean we all have to go out and get degrees in art history or whatever in order to become good potters, but a knowledge of the history, no matter how brief, can make an awful lot of difference. Next, I think a few things that we may not light on immediately for inspiration are books that cover other subjects. I have a few here. Here are 2 manuals of ornament. Now, they may not spring to mind straight away, but when you look inside these, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different styles of applied ornament on objects. So books like that can be a great source of inspiration. As we take another turn, these are such books as archaeological books, which have a great reference resource. This obviously is on medieval pottery, but it is filled with page after page after page of forms, which is really interesting and can be extremely enlightening at the same time. So search for books for inspiration, and of course the web is fantastic because there are millions and millions of photographs out there of pots, and hopefully by doing that you're able to pick little pieces here and there of influence that can determine the style that you work in. So I suppose to summarise, the point is, by finding our own style and our own identity in the world of ceramics, producing pottery or forms which say something about us and are recognisably ours, means that in 10,000 years' time somebody can pick up a piece of your pottery and say, I know who made that, and a little piece of you will live on.